Lights Out Chapter 12. And it's a shorty. And then I got to delete two of them after they load. When the alarm went off at 11:30, Mark got out of bed. He pulled on his clothes, put his Colt on his hip, and grabbed the day pack he'd loaded before he went to bed. It contained a big flashlight, his camouflage rain jacket, a couple of bags of peanuts, a canteen of water, and the magazines for his Marlin Camp 45. He had chosen the 45 carbine for nighttime guard duty, mostly because it had a red dot scope on it. It wasn't a night vision scope, but if you could make out the silhouette of the target, you could put the lighted dot on it and shoot. Mark had killed a couple of feral hogs in the dark on his deer lease with it, and he had a lot of confidence in this carbine. It had an effective range of only about 75 yards, but it made a big hole and was light and handy. When he stepped out of the camper, he noticed the cool front that the weathermen had predicted had arrived. It was in the low 70s, and a light wind was blowing out of the north. Jim stepped out of his pop-up with his Glock on his hip. He was carrying his Mossberg shotgun and a day pack similar to Mark's. The two men walked down to the entrance of the subdivision. They chatted with the two men they were relieving for a couple of minutes, and then took their post by the Silver Hills sign. Jim loaded the magazine on his shotgun, and Mark inserted a magazine into his carbine. Neither man chambered a round. Someone had left a couple of lawn chairs, and the two men put their packs on the ground and then sat in the chairs, holding their long guns across their laps. "I guess this makes everyone feel better, but I still think it's a waste of time," Mark said. "Why do you say that?" Jim asked. "Because the two of us alone couldn't stop a gang of mutant zombie bikers, MZBs, from just driving into the subdivision." Page 67, first time it's used. "We might slow them down a little or give them something to think about, but we couldn't stop them from driving through the field or even running us over us. If we had security like they have at the ranch, we could do some good, but not like this." "You think the ranch security was good?" "Heck yeah," Mark said. Heck wasn't a dollar word. "Didn't you?" "Well, the gate and fence were impressive," Jim said. "Impressive hell." Hell was a dollar word. "Nothing less than a tank is going to get through that gate." "I'm not sure they're any better off in some respects than we are. I was thinking maybe we should run to Gunny's house tomorrow and see what he thinks about the ranch's security." "They have those guys at the gate, 2 roving guards and 2 guards in the complex after dark, plus they have real weapons, not Grandpa's old deer rifle." "How could you not think they're light years ahead of us?" Mark asked. "In some ways they are, but I think they may have some holes too. If we talk to Gunny, we'll know for sure." "Would that hurt?" "It won't hurt anything, but I think he'll be pretty impressed when we tell him about their setup." "Maybe. What do you think about the rest of the setup they have?" Jim asked his friend. "I thought it was great, didn't you?" "Yes, but Lisa pointed out a couple things that concerned me some." "You mean the women and the minority issue?" Mark stated more than asked. "Well, that too, but some other things as well." "Like what?" "Like some of the seeds they had for the garden were hybrids," Jim said. "So?" "You see, hybrid seeds are engineered to produce better fruit, but they can't reproduce viable seed to replant. So after you run out of store-bought seeds, you're out of luck." "I didn't know that." "Neither did I, and that's not all she pointed out to me." "What else?" Mark asked. "Well, she noticed that they had a lot of hay in the barn, but they didn't have any equipment to cut or bale their own once they run out. She said that if it didn't rain for several months, the cattle would go through all of their hay pretty quickly. Maybe they have the equipment and we just didn't see it." "That's what I said, and she asked around while we were touring the ranch. Some of the men told her that all the equipment was in the barn." "Another thing she asked me about was canning equipment. There isn't any. So they don't have any way to store what they get from the garden except to freeze it. That's okay, but what if they run out of fuel for the generator and can't use the freezer?" "I guess that could be a problem down the road," Mark admitted. "I noticed a couple of things too. You saw all the reloading equipment, right?" "Yes, it all looked like top-of-the-line stuff." "It is, but it's all brand new." "What's wrong with that?" "Nothing in and of itself. It's just that I don't think they know how to use it. They've bought a lot of the things they need, but if you don't know how to use it, what good is it?" "Touché," Jim asked. "It's like those Barretts they have. They look impressive, but you don't have someone who really knows how to use one. They aren't any better than Grandpa's old deer rifle." "At least they have the stuff," Mark said emphatically, "and they can learn to use it, can't they?" "Maybe so. But what if their survival depends on something they haven't figured out yet? There's little room for error in a survival situation. If this thing goes on for a long time and gets as bad as they think it might, They can't afford many mistakes. If the cattle die because they can't make hay, where will they get more? If they can't grow food next year because they grew hybrid strains of vegetables, who's going to give them more seeds? If they need to reload ammo for the 50 calibers and no one in the group knew that they needed a particular powder, where are they going to buy it? Knowledge is the one thing you can't just go out and buy. You say all the time that the mind is the ultimate weapon. Well, in a survival situation, knowledge and experience are your best tools. Plus, what if they did get attacked by a gang of mutant zombie bikers, as you called them? Do they have enough manpower to really defend against a large group? I just don't know. That's why I want to talk to Gunny. The other thing that really concerns me about the ranch is Mr. Davis. How so? It's his attitude. How did Jess put it? My way or the highway? It just rubs me the wrong way that he just stays in his cabin while everyone else carries out his wishes. It's his ranch, so he can do what he wants, but I'd like to have some say in things that affect me and mine. The two men sat quietly for a while. Well then, if we decide not to go to the ranch, what are we going to do? Mark said. I think we have several options. We could haul the campers down to the deer lease and stay there. It's far enough from any large city and far enough off the paved road that we should be safe there. But we'd also be isolated from help if we needed it. And while we could eat deer, hogs, and turkey for a while, what are we going to do for fruits and vegetables? Not to mention the other things we'd need. We could go to Lisa's parents in Uvalde. Her dad stopped farming after his stroke and sold off his land. He still does some gardening, though. There's plenty of room for all of us at their new place, but it's pretty close to town. Uvalde is fairly small, but if there was rioting there, I don't know how safe it would be. But I think you're sitting against the best answer. Mark looked over his shoulder at the sign. What, plywood? No, Mr. Literal. Silver Hills. How do you figure that? It's still just our two families. It's not just us. You have good neighbors. That's obvious from the meetings at John's house. With the right leadership, this subdivision could evolve into a real community. There's room for gardening, and we could raise some small animals here. We have room here for all of our families. 2, there are enough people here to do a lot of work, and you have a pretty diverse group. I don't know if we could hold off a big group of mutant zombie bikers any better than they could at the ranch, but we have a lot more manpower. John should be able to come up with some kind of defense plan since he was in the Marines. I guess if everyone worked together, it could be a viable option, Mark admitted. So you've made up your mind against going to the ranch? No, I still think the ranch has a lot going for it, and it might be our best option despite all the negatives, but I believe we really need to look closely at all of our options. Once we choose, we might not be in a position to change our minds. I guess I've been really narrow-minded the last few days, Mark said. As a matter of fact, you have, but we all knew you were just overreacting to what happened at Kroger, and we also knew you'd calm down eventually. You always do. Am I that easy to read? Mark, why do you think the guys at work always invite you to play poker? Maybe because it's my sparkling personality, Mark said with a big grin. Yeah, that's it, Jim said, rolling his eyes. The two friends spent most of the remainder of their time on guard duty talking about what might happen in San Antonio if the power didn't come back on. They also spent some time just looking at the stars. The lights from town usually blocked out all the brightest stars. But with all the lights out and the clear sky that the cool front had brought, you couldn't have counted all of them in a lifetime. When their shift was over, they walked back up the hill and went back to their beds.